The world once knew peace. After the Great War, people believed the nightmare was over. Cities were rebuilt. Children laughed again. But in the shadows, ambition returned. New flags rose, bold, dangerous, unstoppable. The 1930s began with hope, yet ended in fear. In 1938, the Munich Pact promised peace, but it was only the calm before the storm.
Meine Zeit verwendet habe im Dienste meines Volkes. Gib du jetzt eine Stimme ab. Wenn ja, dann tritt für mich ein, so wie ich für dich eingetreten bin.
I am speaking to you from the Cabinet Room at 10 Downing Street. This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note, stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
When the blazing dawn rises, the darkness of war can no longer hide. From the frozen ruins of Stalingrad, where shattered walls stand like ghosts in the snow and smoke, a lonely paper plane drifts forward, gliding through the scars of humanity. It crosses the burning deserts of North Africa, where the sun scorches steel and tanks lay abandoned like skeletons in the sand. Among the rubble of a dead city, a little girl watches it pass, a fragile spark of hope in a world that has forgotten innocence. And then, above the flaming skies of Berlin, the victorious flag rises over the Reichstag, closing the darkest chapter of mankind. When the blazing dawn rises, the war ends, but the memories it leaves behind will burn forever.
World War I. 4 years of thunder and fire had turned the world into a furnace. The sky was never dark, only red. On the Western Front, the earth shook like a living thing, torn apart by shells, rebuilt by blood. Men charged through storms of steel, vanishing into smoke before their names could even be spoken. The air reeked of iron and death. The mud swallowed both the living and the dead alike. Machine guns sang louder than prayers. In the chaos, there were no nations left, only survival. And as the guns roared their last, the silence that followed felt heavier than war itself. Versailles, 1919. In the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, the victors gathered, a palace of gold and reflection, where peace was promised and punishment delivered. Around a polished table, pens replaced rifles, borders were redrawn, debts demanded, and the weight of a war reborn in paper. Germany signed, not in ink, but in the blood of its future. They called it peace. But it was only the beginning of silence before another storm. Peace had returned, but it came with a price no nation could bear. Germany, once the heart of Europe's industry, now crawled among the ruins of its own pride. The Treaty of Versailles had broken more than borders. It broke the spirit of a people. Reparations drained the veins of a wounded nation. Gold fled the banks, coal the trains, and hope the hearts of men. The mark fell faster than faith. Barrels of money could not buy a loaf of bread. Children built castles out of worthless notes. Workers carried their wages in baskets. By the time they reached home, it was worth half as much. The streets of Berlin echoed with the sound of hunger. Windows shattered, protests rose, and from every corner came the whisper, "Who is to blame?" Governments fell as fast as the currency. Promises meant nothing. Faith in democracy crumbled beneath empty stomachs. And yet, somewhere in that despair, Anger began to take shape. A storm was gathering,
Please,
unseen
just half
but
a loaf for this
inevitable.
necklace.
The war had ended, but peace was only an illusion. The drums of Germany no longer echoed within her borders. They reached beyond. In 1936, the soldiers marched into the Rhineland, forbidden ground, once guarded by the victors of the Great War. No shots were fired. No armies moved to stop them. The world watched and did nothing. Confidence turned to defiance. The chains of Versailles broken, one by one.
Auf die Leistung deiner Väter, ja auf die Leistung deiner eigenen Generation. Vergiss 14 Jahre Verfall und hebe dich empor zu 2000 Jahren deutscher Geschichte. Das deutsche Volk ist nicht mehr das Volk der Ehrlosigkeit, der Schande, der Selbstzerfleischung, der Kleinmütigkeit und Kleingläubigkeit. Nein, Herr, das deutsche Volk ist wieder stark geworden in seinem Geiste, stark in seinem Willen, stark in seiner Beharrlichkeit, stark in der Tragen aller Opfer.
They called it Anschluss.
Wir lassen nicht von dir, nun segne unseren Kampf um unsere Freiheit und damit um unser deutsches Volk und Vaterland.
Shadow began to stretch across Europe. In the eyes of the world, peace still hung, but in the heart of Germany, war was already being written. Europe stood at the edge once more. Germany demanded the Sudetenland, the heart of Czechoslovakia's defense, under the promise that it would be the last. In Munich, the leaders gathered: Chamberlain of Britain, Deladly of France, Mussolini of Italy, and Hitler of Germany. Around a table of polished wood and trembling hands, peace was signed, without a single Czech present. They called it diplomacy. History would call it betrayal.
So our Prime Minister has come back from his third and greatest journey, and he said
that the settlement of the Czechoslovakian problem, which has now been achieved, is, in my view, only the prelude to a larger settlement in which all Europe may find peace. This morning, I had another talk with the German Chancellor, Herr Hitler. And here is the paper which bears his name upon it as well as mine. Some of you perhaps have already heard what it contains, but I would just like to read it to you. We, the German Führer and Chancellor, and the British Prime Minister have had a further meeting today and are agreed in recognizing that the question of Anglo-German relations is of the first importance for the two countries and for Europe. We regard the agreement signed last night and the Anglo-German naval agreement as symbolic of the desire of our two peoples never to go to war with one another again.
Britain and France, desperate to avoid another war, gave away what was not theirs to give. The ink dried, and with it, the fate of a nation. In Prague, silence fell. The world cheered for peace, while Czechoslovakia was left to face the storm alone. They believed they had secured peace for their time, but all they bought was time itself before the war returned.
The world will stand by as we secure our rightful place. Move all units to the border immediately.